the Duchy of Pomerania. It's not the most well-known corner of medieval Europe, and you won't find any corresponding modern state on the map today. When I moved to Poland many years ago, this wasn't the story I came looking for. But it turned out Pomerania was something of a crossroads of my ancestors. Poles, Germans, Kashubians, Scandinavians. It's the story of life on the frontier, of a struggle to build some kind of a homeland, but also how a native people were erased. It's not a medieval fairy tale where everybody lived happily ever after. This is the story of a lost world. It's a story that starts at the end of the Viking Age, when the pagan Slavs of Pomerania were surrounded by hostile Christian powers, the Germans, Poles, and Danes. The earlier center of power in Pomerania, the mixed Slavic and Viking city-state at Volyn, had succumbed to repeated invasions. The only way for the region's Slavic leadership to survive was to become a part of the new political order of Christian Europe. And so the Duchy of Pomerania emerged, together with its ruling dynasty, the Griffins. The Duchy of Pomerania had several important centers of power, especially during periods of feudal fragmentation. However, its main capital was here, in Szczecin, today in the northwest of Poland. The Slavic Pomeranians and Poles had closely related languages in medieval times, but this didn't prevent recurring territorial disputes. The first recorded Griffin leader, Bogislaw I, was forced to swear loyalty to the Duke of Poland, following another major Polish conquest of Pomerania. And Bogislaw promised to finally convert the remaining Pomeranians to Christianity. The Poles understood the political risks of German clergy aligned with the ambitious Saxons being the ones to establish the institutions of the Church in Pomerania. Similar concerns had led the Poles themselves to accept Christianity via the Czechs instead of the Germans. Poland sought to orient Pomerania's church leadership toward the Polish Church, but without success. The early Polish state fragmented shortly thereafter, and Wartislaw's successors soon suffered defeats by Danish forces at the end of the 12th century. The Danes and Germans also had an ongoing rivalry for Pomerania. The powerful German Empire had come to dominate the more westerly Polabian Slav tribes, and ultimately forced the Danes to give up their hold over Pomerania as well. A couple hundred years of recurring conquests and crusades against the Slavs had taken a toll on the population, particularly in the west. New settlers were brought in, mostly Low German, Dutch, and Flemish, people who knew how to cultivate this kind of landscape. They were recruited, for example, by German and Danish monasteries, but also granted land by the Slavic Griffin dukes themselves to build new and larger towns with more sophisticated economies, often alongside the older Slavic villages. The Griffin dukes also gave preferential treatment to German knights and nobility that were simply more experienced in running a social order based on Western feudal organization. Ethnically mixed communities existed in Pomerania, going back to the Viking Age, and even mixed marriages were not unusual. But equally, some Slavic and German communities operated in parallel under their separate traditional legal systems for generations. Still, the indigenous Slavs who didn't eventually integrate into the increasingly German-dominated society that grew around them gradually found themselves in poorer, marginalized communities. Some Slavic speakers migrated over time to the easternmost parts of the Duchy of Pomerania, or further into neighboring Poland. The Kashubians were the last major group of Slavs on the duchy's territory. In the early centuries of the Griffin dynasty, a region called Kashubia was located inland from the town of Kołobrzeg, or Kolberg in German. By the late 16th century, the term Kashubian was being applied to the Slavic Pomeranians who lived both in the eastern parts of the Duchy of Pomerania and over the border in the north of the Kingdom of Poland. References to Kashubians further west declined over the centuries as those who remained there increasingly spoke German and became part of the larger German-speaking population. The Griffin dukes themselves certainly intermarried with Danish, German, and Polish royal houses over time, although they continued to use Slavic names that connected them to their origins in Pomerania. Despite their mixed origins, the people of Pomerania arguably developed a common Pomeranian identity, tied to their common experiences over the centuries, something differentiated from the neighboring German and Polish states. Indeed, the 1300s and 1400s saw conflicts involving Mecklenburg and Brandenburg, as well as the powerful Hanseatic Trading League, which was something like the world's biggest international corporation in those times. And literature from the region makes it sound like the duchy was often the scene of highway robbers and infighting among feuding local knights and nobles across the countryside. Perhaps this independent character contributed to their embrace of the Protestant Reformation early on.
It was here in Trzebiatów, or Treptow in German, that Lutheranism was adopted as the official state religion in the Duchy of Pomerania in 1534.
The Duchy of Pomerania eventually found itself involved in the devastating 30 Years' War in the early 1600s, which was fanned by religious differences spreading across Europe. The armies of the Catholic League were only repelled by the entry of the army of Protestant Sweden into the war, as Pomerania's ally. But the fate of the Duchy of Pomerania was sealed. The war took a particularly heavy toll on the Pomeranian population and leadership, and the Griffin Duke, Bogislaw XIV, who had no son to inherit the Pomeranian title, died after suffering a stroke. Contemporaries had been fearing the end of the Griffin line for some time as potential male heirs died off. Unfortunately, this period coincided with religiously motivated public hysteria that famously led to witch trials, and the blame for the Griffins' deaths was actually placed on women like Elisabeth von Doberschutz and, a few decades later, Sidonia von Borke, both from influential noble families and also, conveniently, involved in inconvenient political or financial rivalries. Both were accused of witchcraft and ultimately tortured and executed. Again, this is not the story of some past golden age. The end of the Griffin family line was actually quite ordinary, their dynasty having endured for 6 centuries, making it one of Europe's longest ruling princely houses. But the Duchy of Pomerania's lands were fated to be divided up, split between Pomerania's ally Sweden and Pomerania's longtime rival Brandenburg. Later, the whole territory ended up in the German Kingdom of Prussia. Today, it's split between modern Germany and Poland, following post-World War II border changes and the expulsion of the German population from the east. Still, Griffin banners and seals continue to be used across provinces and towns in both Germany and Poland, and the modest castles of the Griffin dynasty still stand watch along the coast. But the story of the Duchy of Pomerania comes with a reminder, one that anyone walking these shores by the Baltic Sea can easily begin to feel. People only ever pass over this land, these sands, a temporary presence on this ancient coast. Even the 600-year history of the Griffin dynasty, just passing moments by an endless sea.